Success is supposed to feel like relief. Instead, for a lot of entrepreneurs, it feels heavier than failure ever did. More pressure, more fear, more to lose, and a constant voice in your head reminding you that it could all disappear tomorrow. In this season finale, we're pulling the thread all the way through. Why comparison wrecks perspective, why gratitude feels unsafe once you've made it, and why most entrepreneurs never let themselves arrive. And more importantly, we're setting up what comes next, because awareness without structure just creates more chaos. And in season 2, we're going to contain that. We often get stuck in this comparisonitis, which comparisonitis is a great book.
There's a cream for that, just so you know.
Yeah, what?
There's a cream for that if you get comparisonitis.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
Oh, sorry.
You need to talk to your doctor.
I'm sorry.
It's not what this episode's about.
I'm sorry.
But there is a cream for this. And it's, so comparisonitis is when we get caught up in comparing ourselves and what we believe is like our definition of success or failure. And there's a great story in this book in comparisonitis where the author talks about how she was sitting there on her toilet, like doom scrolling through Instagram, just hating her life because she had writer's block and she couldn't sit and write. And then she was like, I'm the worst author ever. So she like was looking at like some other author and she's comparing herself. She's like, oh my God, she just had a new book come out and like, look at her husband is so beautiful and their kids are beautiful and like and I'm worthless. I am the worst. I am a talentless hack. Like I'm never going to be as good as this person. And then all of a sudden she hears this ding, a new email. So she checks her email. Young woman who's in college writing to her says almost verbatim the exact same thing to her. I'm in college. I'm nowhere near as good as writer as you. I look at you and your husband is and your family are so beautiful and you're so happy and you have this new book deal coming out and like, I'm never going to be as good as you, but I would love to. And it was this moment of this epiphany for her of like, oh my gosh, like the way that we view ourselves is very harsh. And it's through these really harshly colored lenses. And I'll never forget, this happened probably maybe in the last 4 or 5 months, 6 months. A friend of mine, Houston Alexander. So Houston Alexander, he's like a UFC legend. He's got one of the fastest knockouts, and he did it like in the coolest way possible. Like he got booked last minute for this fight on UFC. Didn't tell anybody in Omaha that he was going to do it. Like we're talking last minute. Like the dude's like in his 50s. He still does bare boxing and still dominates.
Geez.
Like he trains every day, so he just never stops training. So he's ready to go 2 weeks before this fight, and they had a fighter got hurt. He's out, but he didn't tell anybody in Omaha that he was going to do this fight. All of a sudden, UFC, whatever number it was. Houston, the assassin Alexander. He steps out. Omaha's like losing their mind. He goes out and knocks the dude out in 13 seconds. Like one of the fastest knockouts. Like it was a crazy story. Crazy cool. And he's one of the most just sincere, genuine dudes. We've worked with him with his nonprofit, helping kids in the hip hop community with hip hop culture and the art, the music, dance, rap, emceeing. And so we were working together on some projects. We went out to lunch and he's like, and it was this weird moment where like he was just being like very vulnerable and because this is Houston Alexander. Like, this dude's knocked a dude out in 13 seconds. Like the dude has more celebrities on his phone on speed dial, if speed dial's even a thing anymore. But like he does, like he could call anybody you want. Like he was in Key and Peele's final season finale.
Really?
He was cast in that. Yeah, he was in a sketch. Didn't have any lines.
Yeah.
But like he was in the sketch. He was like the guy at the bar that he bumps into and doesn't want to start a fight with. Like the dude he could call up. Like he's punched Key and Peele punched him in the stomach on camera for like and like he's just got these wild stories and these people. It's all these celebrities. So I'm thinking he's up here.
Yeah.
Right. And then we get to this meeting. Turns out he thinks I'm up here. It's flipped.
Wow.
And he starts to. She's like, man. He's like, I want what you have. Like, I want what you have. I'm like, what do you mean what I have? He's like, man, you've got the success. You've got this company. You've got all these people working for you. You've got this studio. You've got these girls you're showing me like that. You're like, he'd be like, I want that. How do I get that? Help me get that. He's like, help me get that. Like you could tell like the want in his eyes. Yeah. It was like as if I had cracked some mysterious puzzle. And he's just like, okay, dude, I don't care if this makes me look desperate or not, I want to know how you did it. I'm sitting there trying to wrap my head around this. And I'm like, dude, you don't want what I have.
Right.
You don't. And I don't know how many times people have come up and I'm like, have said like, man, they have this version of you they've created.
Right.
And they're telling you these compliments and you're thinking, no. Like I was curled up in the ball in my bathroom crying myself to sleep. you don't want my life.
Right.
You don't want the stress, the overwhelm. You don't know how much of my 401k is gone, it's gone.
Right.
Or my savings, or the embarrassing things I've had to do just to keep things afloat in certain tight times. You don't know the level of stress and the anxiety and all the things. Like, I'm this miserable, sad person who just spends all of his time working in this giant 3-level bungalow on a lake and has no friends, no social life. It's sad. It's pathetic. You don't want that.
But I think, I think, first of all, perception to other people is reality. So obviously that's problematic to begin with. But here's the interesting thing and what I enjoyed about your story. For me, personally.
How I'm sad and pathetic.
What?
How I'm sad and pathetic, is that it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that anybody would want anything you have, is just shocking to me. But the reality of it is that I look at this as a real commonality for, I think, a lot of us, which is success is almost worse than failure. And let me explain. For me, the worst thing someone could tell me is, we're promoting you. Like, in a job, if they're like, yeah, you've done great work, we're going to promote you. I'm like, oh, no, thank you. But no, like, that's okay. Like, I'm fine doing what I'm doing. Why? Because I think for so much of my life, I'd gotten accustomed to, I can deal with failure. I can deal with the bullshit. I mean, hell, I was homeless for a while. I lived in as we talked about in our opens, in a motel out of a garbage bag. It's, I know how to handle the suck. Like, I got that. I'm grounded in that. I don't know how to handle success. I don't. And again, success, it's not like I'm like, oh, I'm wildly successful. I don't feel like I'm successful. I feel like I'm barely holding on right now, trying to just keep all the plates spinning for 5 more minutes so that we can just get to the next thing that I might be able to do, hopefully, like, moderately well. So too many times, I think, from an entrepreneur perspective, success is actually a bad thing. And why? It's because of the fact that you've worked so hard to build to something that when you get that something, it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? There's almost like this big emotional letdown of like, now I got to top that. I got to do more. So here's somebody that you just mentioned that has had tremendous success in their life. They've got all these connections. They've got name recognition, notoriety, all of it.
Joe Rogan has talked about him on his show within the last year.
Yeah.
Like, that's to me, that's on a different level.
100%. And there's somebody then that has all of this success, but guess what? They immediately pivoted to what somebody else has because that just wasn't enough for them. Like, that's the messed up part.
And there's this like meme that goes around where it's like the comparisonitis, where like, oh, if I wish I had a nice car like that. And the person looking at you says, I wish I had a car. Yeah. And then you're there in the car and they're like, man, I wish I had a car. And then the person next to them is like, yeah, I wish I had a car. Like, then the other person's like, I'm on a bicycle. And then the other person's like, man, I wish I wasn't walking and I had a bicycle.
Right.
Like, there's always these degrees where we lose ourselves in like how fortunate we really are.
Right.
We don't want to like acknowledge that. And this is evidence of like just the ADHD mind. And I think comedians, this is very common. When I was doing comedy, and I treated my life as if it was a television, like a comedy show, like a sitcom. So when I was in high school, we moved around a lot growing up. And so like I had created this persona that was this entertainer Matt persona that, would eventually pay off big in radio and television. But at the time it was just to like fit in and like, and so I went from this, the big city to this small town.
Yeah.
Where, I've heard the N-word thrown around casually and I've never even heard that word. I don't know what people are talking about.
Right.
So it's just like really bizarre culture shock. And I remember I had this mindset of every day was a performance. So every day I had to be on my game. I had to make people laugh. I had to be, the class clown. I had to perform. And the only way I could do that is if I hated my parents. If I was angry with my parents, I somehow equated that like that produced better comedy. And comedians will tell you like they want to be sad and depressed and be going through tragedy because, the best comedy comes out of tragedy. But that's not true. It doesn't mean you have to be unhappy the rest of your life.
Right.
It's this isolationist approach that we take. But we think that's what creates this end product. And I think that is with entrepreneurs, and I think every entertainer is an entrepreneur. Like it's a very common trait. And we don't want to acknowledge when things are going good because then it's like, well, we might upset the spinning plates for a moment.
And you have more to lose.
Yeah.
That's a big component to this. And I struggle and suffer from this tremendously in this idea that, we go through this process of, here's where I'm at. I'm going to level up to this place. I get to this place. Well, now I don't want to go back to where we were before, right? Now I'm at place 2. Next year, guess what? I got to place 3. Well, you get high enough eventually, guess what? The fear with each step going up becomes greater that you're going to end up back in that spot. Now, look, some people could argue, Lance, well, that's also because of the fact that between whether it be, the trauma of being an active addict over the years of having that experience and having lived all of that, well, yes, I'm in fear of going back to that. But the reality is I don't spend enough time in the current present being grateful and appreciating what's currently happening in my life, because that's the biggest antidote to that fear of going backwards, right? Because again, the only chance I'm ever going to have going backwards is if I'm not actually present in what's currently happening right now, because I'm just moving faster than I can keep up with.
The universe runs on gratitude.
Yes.
The universe runs on gratitude. You mentioned like being a service and purpose to other people is what drives you. And I think that's in the nature, that is the human existence right there.
Yes.
Or you have service and purpose to other people.
Right.
That is gratitude. It's, our Midwest mindset. It's being grateful, helping other people, serving other people. And I think we don't have gratitude. We don't give ourselves grace.
Yeah.
With that, we don't want to be grateful for what we have because we don't want to acknowledge the level of success. And it is this battle between, I think, uncertainty and certainty, where we think that if we acknowledge success, it's like we jinx ourselves. Hey, don't jinx that, let's ride this out, see how long this can go, because we think that by living in this weird state of where not acknowledging the success, like staying with the unfamiliar, staying with the familiar is certain. And I just had this conversation with somebody. There's a lot of women in particular that I've talked to who have had, there's a lot of shitty men in the world. I don't know if you know this. But
it's an understatement, but yes. I'm ashamed of my own gender. But
women, friends or otherwise, that just are not used to just men being nice.
Yeah.
And genuine and just treating them with respect and giving them positive affirmations.
Yeah.
It just is foreign to them. And I've kind of gotten to a point where I'm I've told some people I'm just not used to people being nice. Well, you can either get used to it or you're going to go back to what's familiar.
Right.
But I can tell you right now, and I just had this conversation, what's familiar to you is men treating you bad.
Right.
And you're going to go back to that because that's what's familiar. Because at least in that environment, you can control it. You feel like you can control it. It feels like you have some certainty. It sucks, but I know what that suck is like.
Right.
This other thing here, success or being treated well, it's uncertain, and I don't know. It could get worse. I can tell you right now, there is no such thing as certainty. And even though something is familiar, that doesn't make it certain. That doesn't make it guaranteed. There is no such thing as certainty. So the other thing I can tell you is great things have only come out of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Taking the risk, going out, asking the girl out at the bar that it becomes your wife, or the things that you do, that your business, taking the risks. Those things, that's living in uncertainty, and you want to live in uncertainty. And that's the most terrifying thing for entrepreneurs is the defining factor for successful entrepreneurs maybe is figuring out a way to be comfortable with what is uncomfortable and realizing I'm never going to be comfortable ever. The minute you are comfortable, you have regressed and you are at risk of the very thing that you think being comfortable prevents.
Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in the idea that the only thing permanent is change, right? And if I'm not embracing the fact that I need change in order to keep growing, then something is profoundly wrong. And, I think that a lot of us in the entrepreneurial world are always trying to do something good. I'm gonna one up the idea that gratitude is the only core concept in this.
I think it's the main fuel.
I think it's the main fuel, but I also think humility is another major part of it. I know that right now, we can do this show, we can joke, we can talk about all these different things, but I know at the end of the day, part of the reason that we're able to pull this off is I think both of us have a decent enough amount of humility to recognize that I don't fucking know everything. The fact that anybody listens to anything I say is fucking shocking to me most of the time, right? But I think that it's just being able to put yourself in a position where, at my best, I am actively doing something for somebody else. At my best. At my worst, I'm living inside of myself. I'm in my own thoughts. I'm doing my own and I'm focused on the things that I need to get done because they're important, that I get them done because other people are relying on me and blah, 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 blah. It's a way of shifting a mindset in and around to recognize that other people's wants and needs in the world are important. And it's a way of looking at it from an entrepreneurial mindset of I watch these folks in business where they're like, they have this great idea that is started and rooted in that. It started and rooted in helping other people. And then very quickly, it becomes something where they're just over everybody to advance their business cause. And I'm like, what was the main mission and purpose of why you started this? You know, and it's like, oh, well, you know, and now I have to actually, well, you don't understand, Lance. You don't understand. This is the nature of business. And I'm like, no, it's the nature of you being that has nothing to do with business itself. You don't need to do that in order to actually have success. And you forgot why you started this to begin with. So it's just really, I think there has to be something in an entrepreneur's daily life that helps them check back in with, why am I doing this? You know, understanding the why. And I know there's a lot of books written about, you know, finding the why and or knowing your why and stuff like that. I just think it's essential.
Yeah, it is. And that's part of like your core values. Like people skim over that part and think, this is like, you know, but like they're important because you use them as a filter. Like, you know, okay, the core value is like, does this decision to this person over or not, does it meet our core values, you know? And if it does, then go ahead, person over. But like, I'm guessing it probably doesn't. I
got to tell you, one thing too was that working with you, when you sent me that whole branding exercise, that was really interesting because when I did the branding exercise, the questions that were in there, some of them were really, really hard. Like I had to stop and think, how do I I kind of understand it, but how do I articulate this in a way that doesn't seem sort of and kind of like, I want to help change the world, for, you know, like in this fashion. But I'd never thought about how to answer some of those questions. And it was really interesting because I'm stuck there going, well, you know, what do you want other people to think of when they think of your business? I'm like, I have no idea. Like that never crossed my mind. So a lot of times just being challenged around some of the branding exercises and things like that, I'm like, yeah, like I need to be able to answer that, because if I don't have an answer for that, then what is this really going to look like?
Yeah. And I think too, like it being rooted and grounded in your why, in the reason that you're here doing this, which can't be money and it can't be a thing. It is always based on people. It needs to be a who, not a what.
Right.
You know, so like, what is it, the reason that you're getting up out of bed every day? And because that's going to translate to why your team is getting up out of bed every day to work, because they need to know why is it that we're doing these things. That also helps you, I think, manage the fear better, because the fear is such a big driver, and it's like this imposter syndrome that we put ourselves in. You know, you mentioned notching up to here, and what happens if I lose everything? Like, okay, well, eventually, and I don't know what year level this is, but I had this happen like earlier this year, where I kind of reached this point where I'm like, it's this I don't give a clause. Now, obviously, I give a too much, right? But you have to have this attitude or this mindset of, okay, what is the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario, I lose everything, everybody's unemployed, and we all start over. Okay, well, I'll be okay. And listen, and then but that sounds like a kind of a f***ed up way to like approach it. But you have to have that. And it takes a lot of you either have to work through it, put a lot in your work, or you're pushed to a point where you either break or you come close to breaking and you change. And I got pushed beyond the breaking point. I think I was about a year past the breaking point for most people. And it impacted my physical health in a way earlier this year where it was literally killing me. And I said, either I live or the business lives. That's where I felt I was at. And I had to accept that, you know what, like I have to prioritize myself, and I can't let, you know, an email or an angry client who's angry about some little thing that they shouldn't be angry. I can't let that, if you lose a client, if you lose a deal, can't let that influence my happiness, because that's not what should be, that's not the validation. I shouldn't be getting my validation from that, you know? And so, but you have to be able to separate yourself from that, A, for your own mental health and well-being, but B, it's how you make the best decisions. You know, like, okay, yeah, it's going to suck that we lose this client, but we need to cut this client because they don't fit our core values.
Right. It's important to think about the idea that if you're building in your mind, I've got all these people depending upon me. That's the first sign when you feel that pressure that all of these people are depending upon me, that you need to really stop and look at what you just said. Because that's the space and place that I see a lot of people begin to lose themselves, their health, their physical health, their mental well-being. Everything starts to fall apart when you build that pressure level up that all these people are depending upon me. Because what I see most often is they feel that pressure and then they go do something stupid and they're like, we're going to pivot now. And they just try and cut all this stuff off because they feel overwhelmed by it. And everyone around them is like, wait, what the just happened? Like, what, you were doing this and you were helping me in this way. And then all of a sudden you have these like new boundaries that I set up because someone told me that I have to have better boundaries. And it's like, yeah, but that's just, now you just look like an asshole because you just pivoted into something and no one knows what's going on. So,
And I made bad decisions. And like one last, this was about a year ago, where it was like, you know, you make bad financial decisions for sure. But like, I mean, it could be any, and it's like you feel the pressure. And I felt the pressure. I'm like, oh my God, like instead of looking at like, what is the problem here as far as like, you know, our cash flow, like expenses, what we're paying, and a big chunk of that is payroll, and then what we're like getting out of it and the management of everything. Like instead of like diving into that and facing that head on, it was easier to like, okay, well, I'll just take out more money. I'll take out another loan or a high interest loan or something like that. And like, then that can cause this, you know, and it's like, I look at it now and like, I think that, like I said, you're either going to get broken by it or you're going to break through it. And to break through it, it's going to take a lot of humility and giving yourself a lot of grace, a lot of acceptance. Really the pillars of what you learn in going through addiction are what are required to get through this. You have to say like, listen, I've made some bad mistakes or decisions, but I've also done a lot of really great. We wouldn't be here if not for me. But so I need to accept all of that. It's all part of the same thing here. And we're not going to hash out the past and like, you know, we're going to figure out a way forward. And then I need to bring the right people in, and I need to analyze and look at each position and each person and each situation with just us being level-headed. Like, okay, what's the return on this versus the cost and the overhead? And like, and you do it that way. And if you do it respectfully, it's like people will understand and they'll stay on board and stay with you. But that's very hard to do. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs get crushed by the weight of that. And it breaks them in the sense that either they try to do that and then they just crumble, or they just ignore that and they live in denial as long as they can, and they turn to substances to numb that feeling of like, I really need to be more honest about my finance. A lot of business owners, like the financial component is really embarrassing. Nobody wants to see they don't want to show the books or anything. And like, when we brought in a person to oversee that, I'm like, listen, you're going to see some things. I'm going to go through this line by line with you, and it's going to be embarrassing for me. And I get that because but like, the only thing, and I preface it is that you have to give grace and understanding because I don't want to partner with anybody who's like, and I told you so, or I'm going to judge you, because that's not going to get us anywhere. All right. So like, we need to be accountable, but we need to move forward. And like, but you have that's rare. I think like 51% of businesses that go out of business in their first 3 to 5 years of being open, a big part is just being in this state of denial. And the Instagram feed is all that matters, the perception, and they don't want to actually address any of the root problems.
So what's the key takeaway?
So the key takeaway here, I think, is like being honest with yourself, and having as much gratitude and humility for yourself as you extend to other people. Because we extend it a lot as entrepreneurs to other people, and we're very compassionate, but we don't often extend that to ourselves. And be thankful for what you have, knowing that like you are successful. Like you wouldn't be a business of any kind open for any amount of time period if you didn't have some success. So you've done some things right, and I think that's a way of being honest with yourself and being transparent. If you're not honest with yourself, then you get into that denial phase, and then things can spiral out of control really fast, and then you're not business.
No,
that sounds
business.
that sounds bad. That sounds inappropriate. That's how you your business. If this season of Entrepreneur Addict helped you recognize the patterns that keep you stuck, the next step is containment. In season 2 of Entrepreneur Addict, we're introducing the Containment Theory, the systems that hold your mind, your time, and your business together when growth starts to break things. Visit Entrepreneur Addict now and be ready for what comes next.